Hi there, thanks for stopping by. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make this button style brooch working from a pattern published in December of 1932. So let's get started. In today's video, I'm going to do something a little bit different. This is the Needlewoman magazine, December 1932. Well, printouts of relevant pages from scans. Look, it costs 4p monthly. Can you imagine buying a magazine now for 4p? Anyways, I digress. So, in this magazine is making embroidered brooches. Now, these embroidered brooches are made over a ring. I have certainly seen vintage pins. I say that because they literally have a safety pin stitched to the back of them with similar designs. And many people call them Dorset buttons. However, Dorset buttons is not mentioned anywhere in this particular article. And this particular filling of weaving a full surface also is not one that I've found on any Dorset button cards. It doesn't mean it didn't happen. It's just that by 1932, these are larger, these are more time consuming, and so therefore probably weren't actually ever worked in this method for buttons. In actual fact, the one design, this one here, is possibly more akin to a Dorset button. However, there's enough similarities here that I thought we would try one. I've not tried one yet. And obviously some of the text with the scan isn't the best. Primarily, I can't quite tell what size the ring should be. It's 1 and something inch. Now, it doesn't look like a half. It looks like it's 2 somethings. However, I've decided it's going to be a brooch. If you read through the instructions, a lot of them are saying to take 3 strands or to use all 6 strands of embroidery cotton. So I've decided I will go with a 1.5 inch ring. I'm going to work the rose tree. So pretty little design. The instructions call for anchor stranded cotton. I don't have any anchor stranded cotton. Also, I noticed that when I was trying to just double check colors, a lot of these don't even seem to exist as these colors. So I've basically just chosen colors I think will work. So the colors that they have said, I will need a skein each of, I think it's 497 light grass green, 500 dark grass green, 479 brown, 503 light coral pink, 5,000, I think even further down it's not 100% which it is. It could be 5999. Anyways, dark poppy red and 699 black. A brass curtain ring. Now you see, the thing about the brass curtain ring, 1 and whatever diameter, these days it's harder to get the larger brass rings. I am going with a plastic ring. I think it's better brooch size. Hopefully I'll have enough space in the middle to work according to the instructions. Otherwise I may have to adapt. My initial thought was to go smaller and go on an inch brass ring, but I think I would have to divide the threads not according to the instructions. So it'd be better to work one first as the instructions state. Now, The black, I didn't have any black, but that is apparently for the background. So I've decided I'm going to go with a really dark brown. Okay, so again, the pinks, it was a dark poppy red and a coral pink. They're both for the roses, so I'm going with like a burgundy and a dusty sort of pink. And then the grass greens, I've just gone with a dark green and a light green for contrast. And a brown, a lighter brown for the actual stems of the rose tree. These are all DMC threads. I can list the colors that I've used, although I think even some of these colors are discontinued. It seems to happen to me that every time I really like a color and buy quite a few of them, they're the ones that are discontinued. So I will adjust the camera and we'll go through the instructions. So the first thing to do is obviously to cover the ring. As the instructions describe, it is cover the brass ring across, cover a brass ring about 1 inch across. I still can't read it on this page either, with button stitch. As the stitches are worked, keep pushing them back so that the ring is completely covered. About 1¼ yards of thread is sufficient and use 6 strands. Turn the button stitch edge to the inside. So when it's completed, turn it to the inside. Now, so it's basically, we're just going to cover in the same way, a blanket stitch, button stitch. I love how the names change. So anyone who is unfamiliar, who's maybe come here for the first time, you can tie this on. I am just going to hold the end of the thread at the back of the ring, go through the ring and through that little loop just to catch that. And then I'm going to work over that tail just a bit. And when I'm sure that that's nicely covered, I'll go ahead and trim that tail. As I said, you cannot just tie it on in the first place if it makes, if it's easier for you. And then basically, we're just going to cover this. Now, what it means by pushing, let's see what the exact phrase is. Keep pushing them back so the ring is completely covered. So what they're meaning is make sure that you push them tight. So you're pushing it back to the previous stitches because you want this to be really nicely covered. So I'll go ahead and carry on with this. Although the instructions don't say, I'm going to thread through, as I always do with Dorset buttons, through the first stitch. As you can see, I don't really have a lot of thread left, so I am also going to just work a little knot. I don't think this is going to be seen when everything is complete. Oops. I'm now going to turn the edge around. I'm using the slicker tool. You can use your fingers. And this time, as opposed to just lining it up on the back, as you might with a ordinary Dorset button, we need to take the whole thing right into the edge. So into the inside edge, because that is where the next stitches are going to be anchored. They're going to be anchored on this ridge. I think that a fine brass ring would be a little bit better for this particular thing than this wide plastic ring, just profile wise. But hopefully it will still look nice. And to get all of those ridges right the way in is actually, because they were on the outside, they're spread out more, so they have to really compact in to get into the inside edge. Okay, so there's my knot, so we'll make sure we keep that out. Right, that's looking better. So the ridge is there on the inside. So I'm going to take another length of the embroidery thread to work the next. I might have to take a few lengths. I'm not really that worried about it. And I'm going to thread onto a tapestry needle. So I am still using all 6 strands. So the instructions now say, hang on, right, I've knotted the end as well. Sorry, I nearly didn't say. So the instructions now say to fill this in a particular order. So I've brought that knot up through one of the ridges. Now, the order in which the instructions say to work is fill in half the circle with stitches, commencing at the center. When finished, take another stitch across the center at right angles to the original one, wherever it passes the A group of threads. Weave, pick up every other one. Sorry, I still take a look at this. As the space is filled, the threads tighten and it is impossible to lift up the stitches, so the needle must go up and down between the stitches. Complete the darning as in C and D, always working from the center out. Okay, so we're working it in quarters basically. Now, if you look very closely at this, it does appear as if there may be a little bit more random happening with the overs and unders. So you could experiment to give a different basket background. So, working from the center, so I will work. Now what it doesn't say is whether they should come down like so, or whether we should go up and across. So I'm going to come back and forth in the same direction, although I've left far too much of a gap there, I think. I get my hand out of the way, I'm causing shadow there. I'll put another one in the middle there. So I think I'm going to go up, over, down, over, and so on. It doesn't actually say to go around and around and around, and I think that you would use up an awful lot of thread if you did it that way, and perhaps be a little bit too dense. So here's one side worked. I was going to sort of put as many as I could into this small curve, but I don't think it's going to really be necessary. So now I'm going to move the thread to about the center of the next direction. got a little kink. And now work in the same way, but this time weaving. So basically over and under, try to let some more light into that picture. There. And then back and forth. So the next row, obviously if you're coming back out, needs to be in opposition. So you can see that one is going over, so this one needs to come under that one. And I know it's a little hard to see, but I'm hoping brown is a little bit better than the black that is recommended anyway. And I will go ahead and work the next side. And so now I have a quarter done. So I will carry on working each of the sections and working from the center out and just keep weaving. So there is my woven brooch support. So you can see that I got a little bit more dense as I carried on and figured out what it was I needed to do. If you're ever weaving and you do have a big gap in anything that you're doing, whilst I can't really show it here because you'll never see it on the dark color, but if you put a second line in following exactly the same line as one of the ones that you are actually where the gap is, if you see what I mean. So it doesn't matter whether it's the right side length or the left side length, just so long as you do exactly the same. Then come back a second time and split those two. So then you would push them aside and then do the opposite in the middle of it, and that helps you to fill any gaps that you might have. So I think that sort of moving forward, I would definitely work a more dense background, but it may not matter. I haven't worked the design yet, so I'm just going to tie this off at the back. And now move on to the next step. So now the background of this brooch is filled with this entirely. Put in the stem and branches of the tree using 6 strands of the brown. So this is the brown that we should be using. I won't need an awful lot, I'm sure. I'm also 100% sure that this will all be, you know, add your knots, don't worry about the way the back looks like. Now, I'll bring in the picture. As you can see, the diagram is basically saying to come up and then to work some stems. It looks as though there are 2 lower stems, branches, and then I would say if we did 3 at the top. So something like that, I think will probably work for this this particular rose. So I'm going to knot the end, and it did say to use all 6 strands. It'd be interesting to know if the stranded cotton in the 1930s was different in any way. I'm going to keep it running with the weave, but you know, you could always go diagonal. That could be quite interesting. And because it's more dense, my weaving is more dense at the top, at this section, I'm going to put that at the top because there's a lot more embroidery happening up there, and I might need that. So I'm going to come up through the ridge at the center. So what did we say? We said move that so that you can see it and I can see it. So I think I'll come all of the way up, so that top will be that stitch all the way up, and then I'll do side stitches. I think that will do. Let's see, so next put the dark leaves on the 2 lower branches and the lighter leaves above, using 3 strands for the leaves. And it looks as though the leaves, I don't know whether somewhere else in the article or if there was another page that says what you should use for the leaves, I'm going to say let's do Lazy Daisy, because they do appear to have loops in those stitches. So let's fasten this off. We said dark at the bottom, and for anyone who has never split embroidery threads, it's always best to split them one at a time. So take out one that you need, lightly hold the rest and pull up. Then you can spread out the length. And that does tend to actually work through more easily that way. Placing the 3 side by side then also makes for a smoother finish. And it's worth remembering that stranded embroidery flosses were initially designed to mimic silks. So by putting the strands side by side, doing them separately so that there isn't the twist, you'll get more of a silky look. So those 3 that are remaining, they're a little bit twisted. I separate all 3 of those as well and lay them side by side again. Let's put a little knot just to hold. And this one has got, I don't know actually, I don't know if they're meant to be Lazy Daisy stitches actually, or if they're just meant to be straight stitches. Because it's still quite large. So I think actually I'm just going to do straight stitches. So even with 3, I think that if we did a lazy daisy, it might be too much. So let's just do random stitches. The way that they have done them on the drawing is they have worked basically stitches. Now when they say the lower branches, I think that what they actually mean is the lower part of all of the branches in order to give a nice dense appearance. So if you look here, there's a lot of stitches. So you can see, yeah, no, it's just a straight stitch. It's not a lazy daisy. I can see it on this now. So there's some just straight stitches on this lower, but there may be a few on the lower part of the upper branches. So I think, again, it's entirely up to you. I'm also going to do my stitches a little longer than I initially did, so that there's a little more impact. So I'll go back over those other ones. I think they're a little bit small. And I am coming up and splitting the thread of the ground weave, so that the stitches actually hold and don't get lost. I think that's a little bit better. And I'm going to put 1 for good measure at the bottom of this upper one. Okay, and again, fasten off. So there's my leaves. Now, the next instruction is to make 4 French knots for the roses using the dark grass green and 6 strands. Now I don't know about you, but it really doesn't quite look like there's dark grass green there, but let's try it out. I'm just going to bring over my button station so that I can clip this and hopefully hold it a little bit more easily for you to see as well. That's a bit better. You should be able to see what I'm doing. I've knotted this, and it says to do them as the diagram. So one of them is over sort of here-ish. So I'm going to come up. I'm going to go around twice, so around my needle twice, and then take the needle back down, not in exactly the same place, and tighten up. And then it wants one sort of here-ish. And one about there. They're slightly off to one side, these roses, in the diagram, but I mean, you could put as many as you want, really. And then there's one sort of down here. Okay. And then I'm just going to fasten that off at the back again. Just going to weave through to fasten it. And then the next step is to use, let's see, arrange these as a diagram, and using light pink, 6 strands, take 3 satin stitches, coming 2/3 of the way around the French knots. So basically, the drawing has, move my scissors, sort of 3 little dots. So I suspect that what you're meant to do is come up close to the French knot, work a stitch, then work another stitch, so it sort of goes over the French knot a little bit. And you see, I personally would have preferred the French knot in the dark pink, and maybe the color is wrong, but the dark pink, you see, has got 4 digits, and that one definitely does not on the text, so it could be that my green is just a wee bit too green. But the flower is a little bit more like a Macintosh sort of rose, I think, is what we're aiming for. And we're going over, I'm going over the French knot a little bit as well. Oop, that one went way over. Made up for it with that stitch not going over far enough. So some pretty little roses. They're quite cute actually. But yeah, I would, next time I would use the lighter green, I think, not the dark green. But it's definitely not a 497, those digits. Right, so okay, for the buds, take a satin stitch of the light pink and a stitch under it of the dark pink. So we'll put a few buds in, so we're going to do, you can't really see the buds on this, so I'm just going to do some random stitches to add the pink over to this side. And I think I'll have a bud up here. That's good. That's 7. I think 7 is pretty good. Like to have odd numbers. And then get a smidgen of the dark. I'm just going to weave that through as well. Oop. Nice if I could keep the thread in the needle. So we want another stitch at the bottom of the light pink stitch. Oh yeah, that's cute. Although I still say I would prefer the inside of my rose to be the dark pink, and I don't see, it just says the 3 satin stitches coming 2/3 the way around the French knots. I think it needs a bit more pink in there. I'll tell you what, I'm going to go off and I'm just going to put one little stitch of the dark in between all them roses, just so that it's got a little bit of depth and it makes me happier. So let's just weave that through a second time, and then we have to do the base. And the base says, so there's our little brooch so far, a little rose bush. The base says the upper stitches of the grass are light grass green and the 3 others are dark grass green. So the way that they've done here is they have basically done a stitch, a stitch, a stitch, and then the light stitches above it. So very, very simple. And if I wasn't reading this in exact order, probably could work more of these stitches at the same time when they're all on the threaded on the needle instead of stopping and starting so often. But I'm sure you'll get the point. So I will do 1, and then I will do another at an angle, and then another coming back down at an angle on the other side. I think that pretty much illustrates what I was just looking at. So if you want to see me do the rest of these, or at least attempt to follow the instructions and do the rest of these, let me know in the comments. I'll see if we can work them all out. It says, you know, I've just realized it didn't even say whether it was 3 stitches or 3 threads or 6. So I've used the 6 on the dark, and I'm going to use the 3 because that's what we already pulled apart of the light. Yeah, so if you want me to attempt the rest of these on camera, let me know in the comments and I'll see what I can do. I mean, they all seem very nice. I think they would be lovely worked in some fancy threads as well. I also think you could use this as a ground to make some really intricate designs. And then I'll just fasten that off. Now, again, I'm not sure whether there is something missing, because there isn't anything to say about finishing or how to add a pin or a brooch. So what I'm going to do is give you a little idea. There's the little rose tree. Just set this aside. Okay, so just an idea for a back, because as I said, the article doesn't, I think the article's not complete. I think there is another page somewhere. for finishing these off, or as they would have recommended. Especially when the whole point of it says, send these to your friends instead of Christmas cards. So you think, yeah, you'd want them finished a little bit. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my button template, and the dark dots I have actually filled in with Sharpie so that you can see what I'm referring to. But they are little engraved dots on the templates themselves. And I'm going to line this up, and I'm going to say, right, which one do I think will be a nice finish? And I actually think that this one right here, so it's outside, I refer to it as outside of dot 1, will be good. So I've got a piece of felt here. I'm going to go outside of dot 1 and mark myself a circle. And I will cut that out. There's my circle, and I've got a little brooch pin, and I'm just going to use some embroidery thread, gray, more or less to match the back. Okay, so again, I'm not going to worry about putting a knot in the end. It's not going to be seen. And I'll use the opposite side to the one I drew on, just in case, so that means you can use a pencil or whatever. Now it's quite a big brooch, so it's not a bad idea to set your brooch pin just a little up from the center, just to give a bit of balance so that your brooch doesn't sort of flop forward. And you can use this method on any Dorset button you want to turn into a brooch. Really, any button you want to turn into a brooch, not just Dorset buttons. It'll cover up the back nicely, people won't see your workings, and it's a nice way of attaching the pin in a neat and tidy fashion as well. So I'm just basically stitching through those holes in the brooch pin. Now obviously if you want to use a safety pin, you'll just need to stitch over the pin itself if you're not using a brooch back, and that's fine. And to be honest, that's exactly what would have been done in the 1930s. It would have definitely been just a safety pin. Probably one of those really nice quality brass safety pins that you used to be able to get and you just can't find now. And I'm just going to knot that at the back. And then take my single length. I'll probably need 2 of these. Tie a knot in one end and close that up so I don't poke myself. Remember that you want your brooch at the top of your pin. Don't go and put it on the bottom, otherwise you definitely will have a droopy brooch. And then I'm just stitching. So I'm just going through the felt and a little stitch through the covering stitches. And you can get quite tiny with your stitches if you want. You can come sort of this way and work them like so. And if you are a little bit concerned about your stitching, you can glue this. Just take care that you don't put on too much glue so that it goes and shows through the front of your work. We do have over on our website DMC threads, obviously loads of different sizes of rings, And you might find that you want to work on a smaller ring, and so therefore I would suggest that, for instance, half everything that said to use 6 strands, use 3, and then perhaps use only 1 or 2 where it said to use 3. You might want to try using a pearl cotton. That should work quite nicely as well, or even move over to the different silks. Again, we've got quite a nice range over on our website that are all suitable for button making. And when you come full circle, you can make a little knot. And then take your thread through a few times. Pull up quite tightly and trim right close to the edge as you've pulled up. And then that end of thread should sink down. You've got a nice little brooch. After I filmed the rest of this video, I decided I would still try one on a smaller ring. So this is a 25mm 1-inch ring. I used 6 strands for the filling and then 3 strands for everything else. As you can see, I've used a lighter background for the background, and I can see why a dark background has been recommended in the instruction, because the lighter that you go, you do see where you're joining the weave to the inside stitches. And not really great with this particular one, whereas obviously on the dark you don't really even notice it. So I think that may be why the instructions were saying black, and I did notice on another one of them the background was black. I haven't read them all yet. The other thing that I did was I did change and use the dark pink for the French knots before I created the roses, and I'm much happier with that for me personally. As I say, I used 6 strands for the outer and then 3 strands for the embroidery. So they've both turned out really sweet and would make nice brooches, but I think this size obviously will make a better actual button. I hope you found that interesting. I certainly did. If you'd like to see me do the rest of these, do please leave me a comment. And otherwise, if you enjoyed the video, do please click like, hit subscribe and that notification bell, and you will be told when I next upload a video. So until the next time, take care of yourselves. Bye bye.